mansions of today, like the billion-dollar Antilla in Dubai, might seem eternal, but they are destined to be abandoned relics like many other epic estates left to rot. Casa Experimental might be the strangest treehouse you've ever seen, so strange that it's actually been photographed and scanned as an architectural marvel worthy of study. It's a large concrete structure that looks kind of like a ton of random shapes crammed together in an interesting style. The inside of the structure looks like your classic McDonald's play place, with tunnels, slides, and weird objects perfect for a kid's imagination to run with. It's just far weirder. The various structures are bolted together in a way that could be hypothetically taken apart and put back together in various different arrangements. So it's basically a giant Lego house that you'd probably need a crane to take apart and put back together again. The entire thing was built by a group of Italian architects just outside of Rome. It was built as a hardcore expression of the brutalism style. Brutalism was a movement that emphasized bare building materials and experimental styles. It was a big deal from the 1950s and 1960s, but nowadays a lot of these structures are under threat. This treehouse in particular is now covered in graffiti instead of kids playing. It's also structurally unsound and has a high chance of crumbling to the ground. Other examples of this include St. Peter's Seminary in Scotland. While it used to be an architectural feat, one of the best churches in Scotland and a drug rehabilitation center, nowadays it's also abandoned and covered in graffiti. It is currently considered a historic Scottish landmark by the nation. Though there have been some plans to restore this and give it a more modern flair, it would cost a ridiculous estimate of around $17 million to restore. Then you've got one of the saddest examples of all time. London's brutalist-era Welbeck Street car park was scheduled to be torn down in order to build a luxury hotel. It was apparently worth over $800 million to tear down and replace. That's a pretty big insult to an experimental piece of architecture, even if it was a car park. Luckily for Casa Experimental, it has been preserved for a special museum piece. At least it will be able to be remembered, long after a heavy breeze tears the whole thing down. Now when you think of abandoned mansions, I bet you don't think about a great big home stationed right on top of a skyscraper. Prepare to be surprised. Bangalore in India is well known for having a lot of ridiculous mansions, so there's an expectation for the rich to compete to see who can have the nicest. This mansion was built on top of the illustrious Kingfisher Tower. If you think its architecture looks totally ripped off of one of the most famous buildings in the world, you'd be right. It was also this billionaire's dream to live in a home based on the White House in Washington, D.C. The OG White House was started in 1792 and cost over $230,000 to complete. Trust me, that was a lot more money back then. Its iconic white columns and circular structure was designed by architect James Hoban. The other White House, known as Sky Mansion, was developed by Prestige Estates. The Sky Mansion is located on the 33rd and 34th floor of the Kingfisher Tower. It spans over 40,000 square meters. Aside from the James Hoban plagiarism, it was going to feature amenities such as a wine cellar, indoor heated pool, outdoor infinity pool, salon, spa, and a gym. It also has a rooftop helipad, which is actually better than the American White House. They have to park their $27 million helicopter all the way in the back. How embarrassing. That was only a part of the multi-million-dollar plan, though. I'm guessing that the bedroom was going to look suspiciously like the Oval Office. That does seem to fit the theme. It reportedly cost over $20 million to complete, which is actually cheaper than the first one if you adjust for inflation. The only difference is only one of these White Houses ever got finished. You see, the billionaire in question had this tiny little problem where he borrowed a huge sum of money and then didn't pay it back. His lenders and the authorities closed in on him and forced him to flee the country for the United Kingdom. So there it still sits, a strange monument to a different country's most famous building. There's some enormous estates where you don't know why exactly the place was abandoned. I mean, there are plenty of rich people in the world who love fancy mansions. Are there just not enough high-end mansion real estate agents because Netflix should do a Selling Sunset style show and fix that problem for good. When it comes to the infamous Neverland Ranch though, I mean, it's probably just better to just put up some explosives and blow the whole estate up like the Joker with a hospital. There is no way this home will ever be anything else but a monument to the colossal disillusion of Michael Jackson's legacy. The story behind this place goes all the way back to 1983, where Paul McCartney was working with young Jackson on Say Say Say. The two stayed at the gorgeous Sycamore Valley Ranch in California. Michael vowed to one day buy the ranch to McCartney. In 1988, he made good on his promise and picked the place up for a pretty massive $19.5 million. In '88, that was chump change for Jackson. He renamed the estate Neverland Ranch after the famous location from Peter Pan. He then built a full amusement park there and even a petting zoo. He was known for hosting many events there, including Elizabeth Taylor's 1991 wedding. Then everything came apart as allegations against Jackson started mounting up. In 2003, the police raided the place and Jackson abandoned it, vowing to never live there again. The property became a real problem for Michael Jackson, causing him to fire most of the staff and start removing the rides so he could sell it. Unfortunately, the controversy had made this quite hard. His legacy had a bit of a resurgence after his passing in 2009, but all of that was torn apart by the HBO documentary Leaving Neverland, which pretty much ended any chance of Jackson or Neverland Ranch ever breaking free of controversy and ruin. The abandoned ranch was then given its original name, Sycamore Valley Ranch, and then put back on the market. It remained an empty eyesore and metaphor for the fallen king of pop's reputation until billionaire investor Ron Burkle bought it for $22 million. This was a huge discount from the original $100 million asking price. If you're wondering when Burkle plans on moving in, don't. He apparently bought it for the land, not the estate. So yeah, maybe expect to see a controlled demolition set to the tune of Beat It in the near future. Okay, if there are any screenwriters out there, you might want to start taking notes, because this next one is definitely destined to be the setting for one truly terrifying horror movie. Lennox Castle is a massive estate with a pretty wild history. Building began on the castle in 1937 just out of Glasgow, Scotland. It was constructed by a legendary Scottish architect for Clan Kincaid. This isn't what the castle is really known for, though. In 1927, the castle and the land surrounding it was purchased by the Glasgow Corporation. They transformed it into a hospital. What it was really known as was one of the most infamous asylums in the world. It also had a separate maternity ward that wasn't supposed to be that much better either. The conditions here were absolutely awful, with overcrowded rooms, abusive doctors, and awful quality of life for the malnourished patients staying there. The place was known for patients breaking out into fights and other patients desperately trying to escape. Things reached a head when a fight evolved into a full-blown riot. The staff and many patients fled the castle and actually locked the rioters inside. Once they returned, they found that the entire place had been ransacked. It has since served as the ultimate example of how horrific conditions in hospitals like this could truly be. As terrible as it was, the hospital wasn't vacated until the 1980s. It was formally closed in 2002. Things continued to go poorly for the castle. In 2008, the estate caught fire, which pretty much left it in ruins. Today, there's little chance it will ever be anything hospitable again. Even if it was, there's no chance you could get someone to buy it. I mean, this place is 100% haunted. Though again, it would make for an excellent setting to a horror movie. What are you doing? Get started on the screenplay already. Mansions aren't necessarily just big, imposing houses that are built so that all of your neighbors know just how much better you are than them. They are sometimes cool ways to show innovation and trends that will flow down from mansion life to everyone else's life. Aside from the primary function to show all of your neighbors just how much better you are than them. This mansion in Swannanoa, Virginia definitely fulfilled all of those duties and then some. This Italian Renaissance Revival mansion was constructed in 1912 for Major James H. Dooley and his family. It set them back $2 million, which is just over $50 million in today's money. It apparently took 300 artisans 8 years to complete this mansion masterpiece. What exactly was it that took hundreds of artisans nearly a decade to get right? Well, anything from the home's marble flooring and wall panels to its gold plumbing fixtures. Then there's the main event. It has a 4,000-piece Tiffany stained glass window. The window was actually based on Mrs. Dooley herself. It set the family back what would be $64,000 today. As far as innovation, this home definitely led the way for homes all down the street. It was the very first home in the neighborhood to be outfitted with electricity. Not only that, but it also featured other modern advancements like an elevator and a cutting-edge dumbwaiter. I imagine going to dinner at this house was kinda like getting a glimpse at the near future. Once the family passed, the inheritors immediately sold the gargantuan responsibility for $300,000. That's when the house began its storied journey to pretty much becoming everything else a house could be. Right after the first sale, it became an illustrious country club. It probably would have stayed that way all the way to today, but this little thing called the Great Depression wiped country clubs out, this house included. After several years of being empty, it was then sold to the American military, then bounced around a few wealthy artists until it became a New Age university. It was then leased to a few more people until it became a museum, and then that closed too. Now it's just become a giant Gilded Age money pit. So if you want to buy this spot, just know that it's likely to require hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in renovations. That, and you'll probably have to chase out the fanciest family of raccoons in all of Virginia. All mansions have an air of class about them. By their very design, mansions are built to basically be the tuxedos of houses. That being said, some are definitely classier than others. A mansion personally gifted to you from the Queen of England? That's about as classy as it gets. The Queen did exactly that in 1986 when she gave the Duke and Duchess of York a 665-acre piece of land. The Sunninghill Park estate was completed in 1990. The house was known colloquially as the Dallas Palace or South York because of how much it looked like the main house from the Dallas TV show South Fork Ranch that was so popular at the time. Though I gotta say, I didn't know the ratings were so big in the United Kingdom. It was a 12-bedroom house with stables, a swimming pool, and a grand reception area worthy of royalty. This wedding gift from the Queen was a true beauty, but it wasn't enough to save the marriage. While they tried to live together for the sake of the family, this didn't work. Eventually, everyone moved out of this wedding fantasy home from the Queen herself. It was then sold for $19 million to an oligarch from Kazakhstan, which was well above the asking price. Despite that, it was eventually left abandoned. Then it was pretty much left to rot. It had smashed windows, overgrown weeds, broken doors, and was in desperate need of about a dozen coats of paint. Or, a demolition. Well, the locals apparently agreed. They pitched a number of ideas for the place, including making it into a homeless shelter. Unfortunately, it was too dilapidated for even this to work. Finally, everyone got their wish and the house was scheduled for demolition in 2016. Then plans are going forward to create a new place on the bones of this royal disaster. So it's gone about as well as Prince Andrew's life has since the 90s. Some estates are just too big for their own good. People don't properly realize just how much money it costs to employ enough people to clean it, let alone the energy requirements, renovations, and 10,000 other problems such a massive home has over its lifespan. I mean, the BBC has done about a dozen shows about this very problem, and I don't even think they have fully covered it. So no one's really shocked to find out a massive home like Linwood Hall ended up becoming one of the largest abandoned mansions in the world. It's a 110-room neoclassical revival mansion in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. The place was designed by Horace Trumbauer and took from 1897 to 1900 to finish. The home, built for industrialist Peter A.B. Widener, is the largest Gilded Age mansion in Philadelphia today. The place stretches across 70,000 square feet on 33 acres of land. The most impressive feature of the home is the ballroom, which can house over 1,000 people. Originally, the home was built for $8 million. Adjusted for inflation, that would be over $240 million today. The massive estate has jumped from owners and purposes many times over the years. From 1915 to 1940, it was open to the public to display the family's legendary art collection that included over 2,000 sculptures, paintings, and other works. Then during World War II, the grounds were used for training military dogs. I really want to see a Captain America-style movie about that. In 1952, it was purchased by the Faith Theological Society to be a Christian school of higher education. They had to drop a massive sum of $192,000, over $1.8 million by today's standards. It remained this way for over 40 years. In 2003, the property was foreclosed for good. Since then, it has been abandoned. There have been multiple attempts to sell the place off, but it seems unlikely. The asking price for this home is around $11 million, but that's not really the problem. It's been reported that it would cost well over $50 million to fully renovate the place. That does not seem worth it even if it was from the Gilded Age. Buckingham Palace is apparently worth $2.5 billion. If that place ever gets abandoned, I'm calling dibs.